For more on the latest trends, I'm joined by Kyle Orland from San Francisco. Kyle is a senior gaming editor at Ars Technica. Welcome, Kyle.
Hi there.
So give us a bit of the buzz. What was really a highlight this year?
So everywhere you looked at the Game Developers Conference this year, it was virtual reality left and right. This is the first year where these virtual reality headsets have really been consumer products that people could afford in their homes. But as you heard in that report, it's still an expensive thing for people to get into the house. A lot of these places are spending a little more money, $10,000, $20,000 to make an installation at a mall or at an arcade that people can go to, and you can get an even bigger experience than you could get at home. There are these backpack experiences now that you can mount onto your back in a laptop form factor, and that removes the wire that you need to tether yourself to the computer, lets you move around a little more freely. A lot of technology trying to figure out where virtual reality is going.
Now, for people who perhaps don't want a big backpack or some giant goggles, we know that there's also the Switch, a big day for Nintendo. So how big of a game changer is Nintendo's Switch?
It remains to be seen. It came out today. It's been very well received for The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. I think it's an instant classic, the kind of game that can sell the system on its own. But otherwise, there are some issues with the hardware. Some of the controllers have trouble connecting in certain situations. There are some issues with online connectivity, but otherwise it's a very interesting concept. It changes from a portable console to one that you can put on the TV. And while I really enjoyed playing it as a portable, on the TV it doesn't really hold up against Sony's PlayStation 4, Microsoft Xbox One, things like that. So it remains to be seen whether that's really a niche that Nintendo needs to fill.
So being that it is so early in its release, how do you think competitors are going to respond?
I'm not sure they're going to respond directly. Sony and Microsoft really have their own way of going. They're aiming for that high end of the market, and they've been doing very well with that. Nintendo always goes its own way, and that's been very successful for them semi-recently with the Wii, which sold over 100 million units, and then they followed that up with the Wii U, had a very different concept. It was a much harder sell. That didn't do nearly as well. The Switch, I think, has a much more compelling use case. People who want a Mario or Zelda game on the go, or a Pokemon game, with Pokemon Go being so successful, I think that will help get some attention to Nintendo and the Switch. So I think they will be on the upswing, but I don't think they're really going in the direction that directly threatens Sony and Microsoft are really going to make them change what they're doing already.
Now, Carl, what about any disappointments? Anything that really didn't live up to the hype that you saw out there?
I've seen quite a few, going back to virtual reality, I've seen quite a few efforts to do hand tracking without anything in your hands. Usually right now you need to hold a controller or have some sort of glove that can actually be seen. There were a lot actually at GDC that I saw that were trying to track your hands just with a camera that would see your hands and try to translate that into computer data to know where those hands are. I really don't think that's quite there yet. The ones I've seen had just enough issues with figuring out where your fingers were, figuring out where your hands were, and when you see your hands jump in location from where you expect them to be in a virtual reality sense, that's very disconcerting. So not quite there yet.
Now let's also look at Chinese developers. What did we see from them and who was there?
Well, I saw one company, Usense, which has some Chinese offices I know. They were one of the ones actually doing that hand tracking solution that I was talking about. And unfortunately, like I said, I don't really think they are quite there. It's early days yet, and hopefully they'll get it. It would be very nice to have something that could track your hands without the need for external hardware, but it's too early yet.
Now, Kyle, as you mentioned, virtual and augmented reality clearly not going away anytime soon. So what's next for game developers?
You mean after virtual and augmented reality, or?
Yes. What does the future hold?
That's a good question. If we're looking down the line in 10 years, I really think we're going to see a form factor to these VR and AR headsets that really changes the game. Right now, they're big, bulky headsets that stick out like this. They're a few pounds on your head, and then they need a big computer to get the highest end experiences. With the way technology goes, in 10 years, it could be, semi-transparent sunglasses that you can actually see through. So you can see the world around you. You're not disconnected, but you can see things layered on top of the world. Maybe when you pass a restaurant, you see reviews for that restaurant pop up, or the dream of science fiction. You see a person, and you see social information about that person, reminds you of their name, their Facebook profile, things like that. For games specifically, once the world around you really is the seamless gaming experience, you can have a lot of things that are just not possible in virtual reality, or especially on a TV screen. You could have, for instance, a ghost story where a ghost is actually haunting your house. You're sitting there watching TV, and the ghost just comes in and starts watching with you, perhaps. It would be a totally new type of game that we wouldn't even think of doing right now with our current technology. But with augmented reality, the possibilities are endless.
Well, the future sounds quite terrifying, but thank you so much for your insights, Kyle Orland, Senior Gaming Editor at Ars Technica.